when Nurse Jasmine Carter was stopped and publicly humiliated in front of the entire city. The injustice shocked a nation. Sergeant Donovan, acting from pride and pressure rather than true danger, became the face of a broken system and sparked outrage across communities. But with unexpected courage from within the police force and unwavering determination, Jasmine's fate took a dramatic turn. Just wait to see how this tense story unfolds and how justice claimed the final word. Jasmine Carter began her day wrapped in anticipation and gentle determination. The sky over Atlanta promised clarity golden light, filtering through autumn leaves, casting moving shadows on the sidewalks. Jasmine adjusted her hospital badge as she stepped out, her mind already running through the day's triage. Which patients needed urgent care? Which colleagues might need encouragement? How every interaction was a chance to change someone's outcome. As a nurse in emergency medicine, her purpose was woven into each moment. She saw her career as both responsibility and service, a path chosen with conviction after watching her mother teach generations of students the value of kindness. Atlanta, a city bustling with stories and intersections of hope and struggle, filled with all kinds of people on their own missions. Jasmine was respected for her commitment and her ability to invoke calm when situations grew tense. She reflected the spirit of her hometown patient, persistent, determined. Her route to work passed through a busy avenue where, on this particular Thursday, ramps and barricades signaled preparations for the city's annual marathon. Volunteers were pinning race packets to runners' shirts, neighbors cheered from the curbs, and the mood felt festive energy and joy lingering in the air. Jasmine smiled seeing the celebration, remembering years past when she would cheer on friends from the sidelines before racing to her own shift. This morning, however, held an unusual edge. As she hurried down the crowded sidewalk, the distant buzz of police radios echoed against storefront windows. A squad car moved alongside the parade barricade, its lights casually flickering. Nothing aggressive, but noticeable. Jasmine's thoughts were still elsewhere. She worried about being late and how her absence might affect the already stretched ER team. Sergeant Blake Donovan, tasked with overseeing traffic control for the marathon, was monitoring the crowds, searching for anything out of place. He was a man shaped by years in law enforcement, his sense of order rigid. Donovan believed in command and authority, always striving for predictability amidst chaos. Spotting Jasmine near the intersection, Donovan initiated a routine check. "Ma'am, ID please." His voice was official, practiced. Jasmine nodded politely, explaining her rush, reaching into her bag for her wallet. At that moment, marathon volunteers and local news cameras positioned nearby for live coverage caught sight of their exchange. Tension quietly layered onto the scene. Jasmine, anxious and preoccupied, moved with the urgency characteristic of her profession. Donovan, interpreting her haste as a sign of disregard for the process, leaned into protocol. Bystanders paused, quietly observing the interaction, sensing an unspoken uneasiness. Donovan asked Jasmine to step aside. She complied, repositioning her bag and continuing to search for her identification. In her mind, she was seconds away from showing her credentials and continuing on. In Donovan's mind, her gestures seemed erratic and unfamiliar within the context of public safety at an event like the city marathon. The signals between them were mismatched routine for one, caution for the other. Both acted in ways rooted in habit and experience. Jasmine, used to urgency and problem-solving. Donovan, used to scanning for unpredictability and responding assertively. What happened next unfolded in split seconds. Donovan, perceiving the situation as tense, moved to intervene more directly, his posture signaling command. Jasmine, caught off guard, tried to explain herself, her words drowned in the noise of surrounding crowds and media equipment. The exchange grew more frantic, not through intent, but through compounded misunderstandings. Nearby cameras, originally positioned to capture highlights from the marathon starting line, inadvertently streamed the interaction. Moments later, thousands of viewers witnessed the exchange. An ER nurse in blue scrubs momentarily immobilized by official procedure, her morning derailed by a misunderstanding. Online reaction was immediate and intense. Clips circulated with speed across social platforms. hashtags formed. Commentary appeared from distant cities. Viewers fixated on Jasmine's composure, her professional attire, and the circumstances that led to public scrutiny. The hospital staff, many of whom had started their shifts hours earlier, watched as their colleague's story was picked apart and discussed openly. Jasmine became a figure of uncomfortable recognition, not only for her hospital, but for communities nationwide. Her family, devoted to education and service, reeled as her name overtook headlines, transforming her everyday life into a marker for public debate. People from all walks of life saw reflections of their own uncertainty in Jasmine's situation. Some identified with her urgency, others with her calm under pressure. For many, the scene illuminated how quickly the familiar could shift. Through it all, Jasmine remained resolute. She drew on the inner resilience formed in childhood and honed in hospital wards, believing that each day offered a fresh chance to rise above challenge. The city, sensing the impact of the morning's events, paused to consider how quickly routine could unravel and how easily misunderstanding could bring ordinary life to a standstill. As Jasmine sat in a quiet ER waiting room soon after, she kept replaying the morning in her mind, searching for what could have been done differently. Her story, now broadcast far beyond Atlanta's streets, asked a nation to look deeper into moments at the edge of routine and uncertainty. Inside the quiet hum of Atlanta General's emergency ward, Jasmine Carter opened her eyes and found herself on the other side of the nurse's desk. The antiseptic air and familiar soft beeping of monitors now framed an unfamiliar reality, her own. Staring at the ceiling, she tried to process that she was no longer the caretaker, but the one being cared for. Dressings covered her knees, a faint ache reminding her of every movement that morning. The world outside her hospital room had already changed. Overnight, her name became an echo on news stations and social feeds. The video shaky, real, and raw traveled rapidly, sparking conversation in workplaces, homes, and city council meetings. Justice for Jasmine glowed from screens in living rooms and taxi back seats, invoking emotion from thousands who had never before spoken her name. Each viewer saw in Jasmine's story a reflection of uncertainties they faced in their own lives, the sudden turn from routine into the unknown, the tension that could spring from a single misunderstanding. Hospital hallways, usually bright with quiet determination, were tinged with confusion and a sense of loss. Jasmine's colleagues, nurses, and doctors who once relied on her steady hand, passed by her door and hesitated. Some left notes of encouragement on brightly colored sticky pads. Others lingered in the doorway, unsure how to offer comfort to someone always known for strength. Jasmine tried to smile through their visits, suppressing her own questions, how this would affect her patients, whether she'd be welcomed back to her role if trust in her had somehow shifted. At home, concern thrummed within her family. Her mother, a woman built of gentle wisdom and steady nerves, called often, offering reassurances with every word. Friends who hadn't reached out in years sent messages, their support mingled with their own worries about the future. Jasmine felt a weight in their voices, an undertone of fear about what could happen next, not just for her, but for anyone who found themselves suddenly under a spotlight they never sought. Across the city, demonstrations took shape, first small and uncertain, then gathering energy. Protesters held signs bearing Jasmine's image, voices raised not just in frustration, but also in hope for a different outcome. People spoke her name in the context of reform and change, their chants calling for understanding and for compassion to shape official responses in difficult situations. Meanwhile, Sergeant Blake Donovan addressed the incident through official channels. On every major local broadcast, his calm voice recounted the day's events, explaining his perspective. He described a momentary uncertainty, a split-second decision, and maintained that all actions had followed standard procedure. Some believed him. Others saw only the discrepancy between his words and the images replayed so many times on TV. For Jasmine, the aftermath was more than headlines. It was emotional uncertainty. She felt responsibility for the unrest, concern for her family's privacy, and wondered if her quiet life would ever truly return. Yet as each day passed, she found herself drawing comfort from unexpected places. A grateful former patient sending flowers, a colleague delivering homemade soup, a stranger's handwritten letter calling her brave even before she realized it herself. Despite the sense of disruption, Jasmine began to understand how deep roots of empathy could grow in uncertain soil. The city, watching her recover, discovered a shared vulnerability and a longing for a world where routine did not so quickly give way to fear. Her recovery became a symbol not only of personal healing, but also of a community's search for hope and connection in challenging times. In the weeks that followed, Atlanta became a landscape of transition. Its citizens and institutions, once moving to the rhythms of daily life, were now gripped by conversations that reached far beyond Jasmine Carter. For Jasmine, recovery meant learning to navigate a new world where each message from strangers, each headline, and every gathering on the courthouse steps seemed inextricably linked to her name. It was in this swirl of attention and uncertainty that Michael Garrett entered her story. A quietly focused advocate, Michael had grown up witnessing the challenges that came with standing for those whose voices were too often drowned out by larger systems. His belief in fairness was rooted in personal loss, and he approached Jasmine's case with empathy, patience, and a drive to have every story truly heard. Despite his years of experience, this case felt different. It resonated at the very core of who he was, not just as a lawyer, but as someone who believed in the possibility of meaningful change. Their first meeting was marked by a quiet determination. Jasmine, still finding her footing amidst all the attention, wasn't looking for revenge. She sought truth, not only for herself, but to ensure others would not face the same challenges in silence. Michael, sensing her spirit, promised to treat her case as if it were his own family's. Together they dove into an exhaustive process of discovery. Michael assembled a team to review countless hours of video, not just from official news outlets, but from phones and GoPro cameras worn by marathon participants. Jasmine wrote down everything she remembered, reconstructing the morning moment by moment. They spoke with witnesses, nurses, runners, street vendors, many of whom recalled more confusion than conflict, and described Jasmine as composed yet concerned. As days turned into weeks, a sense of momentum built around the evidence. Michael's team gathered medical records, witness testimonies, and expert analysis, constructing a narrative that highlighted gaps in the official version of events. Support groups and community leaders started campaigns, hosting forums where people shared their own encounters with miscommunication and procedural missteps. One evening, as Jasmine reread a letter from a recovered patient now living out of state, Michael received an unexpected call. Officer Noah Stevens, a rookie patrolman who had been stationed nearby the morning Jasmine was stopped, requested a confidential meeting. In the low light of a crowded cafe, Noah nervously slid a USB drive across the table. With quiet determination, he explained that he could no longer keep silent about what truly happened. The contents of that drive included segments of the police radio transmission from the day of the marathon. As Michael listened to the recording, each word was heavy with consequence. Donovan's voice, assured and matter-of-fact, issued instructions intended more for appearance than for public safety. Make it a show. We need to look decisive. Those words, so clear and undeniable, provided a stark contrast to the public statements broadcast on news stations. Michael realized the case was no longer about a single misunderstanding. It had become evidence of how public performance and private decisions could shape and even distort justice. He shared the new evidence with Jasmine, whose reaction was a mix of relief and renewed commitment. Michael's team prepared meticulously, knowing this material could change the direction of the entire effort. As the story developed, news of the discovery began to surface in the press and within City Hall. Community organizing took on a new dimension. Rallies grew larger, but their tone shifted. Activists carried not only signs of protest but banners of purpose, calling for transparency and for institutional learning. Schools, religious centers, and businesses held open forums where people voiced fears, hopes, and concrete ideas for reform. Through it all, Jasmine's experience remained central. She received letters from across the country, from physicians who had experienced misunderstanding while serving patients, from teachers who wanted to use her story in lessons about resilience, and from families who shared how her perseverance inspired them. Jasmine balanced gratitude with the weight of attention, carrying herself with the same calm determination that had once eased tense moments in the ER. Within her, a sense of hope quietly grew, a hope that through resilience, honesty, and the willingness of strangers to step forward, even the harshest trials could open the door to understanding and, ultimately, change. Each day, as the legal team advanced, Jasmine recalled her mother's teaching, that sometimes living one's values meant trusting that even one person's courage could change a city, and that every story, if told fully and truthfully, had the power to mend divides and inspire. On the day the trial began, the city of Atlanta felt transformed by expectation. Outside the courthouse, crowds of supporters gathered early, holding signs that spoke of hope, unity, and the need for change. Reporters set up their equipment along the steps, capturing the expressions of people who had followed Jasmine Carter's journey from a simple morning routine to the center of a national conversation. Inside, the courtroom buzzed quietly with emotion. Jasmine sat beside her attorney, Michael Garrett, her resolve steadied by weeks of preparation and the knowledge that so many in the community believed in her. The benches were filled with familiar faces, colleagues from the hospital who had witnessed her compassion firsthand, neighbors affected by the course of recent events, and activists committed to seeing justice served. As the proceedings unfolded, attorneys presented witness testimonies and evidence with deliberate clarity. Marathon volunteers attested to Jasmine's calm demeanor and willingness to cooperate. Medical professionals spoke about her exemplary character and dedication. Each account reinforced the truth of what had occurred, not just a procedural misstep, but the story of a woman genuinely trying to serve her community under difficult circumstances. The atmosphere shifted dramatically when the patrol radio recordings were played aloud. Donovan's instructions, focused more on appearance than actual safety, echoed through the courtroom. The reality behind his choices became impossible to deny. As listeners absorbed the implications, the narrative changed from an unfortunate misunderstanding to an urgent call for transparency and accountability within law enforcement. When Jasmine was called to testify, her words carried gentle strength. She shared her experience not with anger, but with a clear desire for reform and healing. Her hope was simple, that others would not face the same uncertainty, and that routines could be restored to safety and respect. After several days, the judge announced the verdict. Donovan was found guilty of excessive force and misconduct. Outside, the crowd's tension broke into applause, their voices filled with relief, pride, and cautious optimism. Jasmine exited the courthouse to see people embracing, shaking hands, and exchanging words of determination, a collective vow that her story would not be forgotten. In the weeks that followed, Jasmine returned to Atlanta General, choosing to resume her work as a nurse. Her colleagues greeted her not with fanfare, but with honest appreciation. The hospital staff offered quiet reassurance, and Jasmine found new meaning in the routines she cherished. On her first day back, she discovered a small envelope on her desk. Inside was a handwritten note. "You helped heal more than you know." Beyond the hospital, Atlanta moved into a new chapter. Community forums discussed ways to improve procedures and build trust. Policymakers met with citizens, eager to translate the lessons learned from Jasmine's journey into real reform. Families talked about fairness at dinner tables. Teachers used the events as examples in lessons about empathy and constructive change. Jasmine's story became woven into the fabric of the city, not just as a memory, but as a source of inspiration. She continued to nurture those around her, her daily work marked now by both humility and enduring hope. Though challenges remained, Atlanta was different. People spoke openly about trust and responsibility, aware that every choice could ripple through an entire community. Jasmine, once at the heart of a crisis, became a symbol of how perseverance and compassion can guide a city toward a future shaped by justice and the quiet power of healing together.